time. It all depends on how much computer power goes into the existing mining process. So everything is, there's so much thought put into the system. And it wasn't until I discovered the strict limits, the upper limit on Bitcoin, that well, there's two things that made me. Bitcoin is something like a leap into the unknown. It really is. But I know many people, many businesses that are currently doing their accounting, even Andrew, even right now in Bitcoin, they're doing their accounting in Bitcoin.
How can they?
It's all a matter of the transition process. We're in the middle of the transition. Last year, in February last year, I was working with a contractor who was incredulous towards my views on Bitcoin. And he thought he would really get me. He said, how about this, Tucker? You take your payments in Bitcoin for your services. How about that, huh? And he expected me to say, well, I can go that far. Of course, I jumped at the chance. I said, please, yeah. If you'd been paying me in Bitcoin, when Bitcoin is $14, the sell as soon as they receive Bitcoin, they immediately convert them to dollars. And I think this is going to persist for a very long time. But listen, Andrew raises the prospect of government regulation, right? The more governments get involved, providers don't yet provide. There's such a high risk for user error in Bitcoin, I have to say, right now. I feel it myself, when I'm sending Bitcoin back and forth to people, one wrong click of the button and suddenly you're lost. You sent one Bitcoin actually illustrates that.
Just to throw one more point we're going to agree on, just think of this earlier, about real currencies and fiat currencies. Right now you've got and I've been doing this in the world for 15, 20 years, dealing in financial ideas, economic ideas. I've never seen at any point throughout the century, it's a 120, 130-year period, but overall, prices were down. When Benjamin Franklin said a penny saved is a penny earned, he actually wasn't an idiot. It was true, because if you saved a penny, you went to spend it 20 years later, it was worth more.
Discussions with Andrew, and so I'm privileged to ask them a couple of questions. First, I'd like to just weigh in and, of course, elaborate on Andrew's obvious point about prices. But prices really are not the issue. It's spreads that are the issue for business. The spread between prices and wages. And the government's own numbers right now show that those spreads are actually quite favorable. Obviously, if the government declares that wages are going to go to 100.
Yeah, obviously gold can be volatile. I think it's only volatile because we live in a world in which it's not considered money. It's not considered by the state to be money, and it's been demonetized. You have central banks around the world that don't want gold to appreciate.
Going to give us a gold standard. The relevant comparison is Bitcoin versus nationalized money. The dollar, the euro, the yen. These are the governments have nationalized.
5 seconds, something like that? Sure. I'm ready for you, sir.
Verify, not the incentive to mine.
Correct.
Right.
Once they're already outstanding, you're not garnering any more.
Any new Bitcoin. Presumably, the incentive will come from the fees associated with the transactions themselves. I'm just in awe of the designer of this program, who understood human nature, that people need to be paid for their work, and he figured out 2 ways to do it. One was getting Bitcoin in the early days, and if you mined a lot in the early days, you got a lot of Bitcoin. But now, mining is very difficult. How many of you were here last night and saw that great mine?
Stabilize their currency by making Bitcoin legal tender. And then maybe we could answer other questions. Would Venezuela stabilize their currency by making gold legal tender? Or by making some type of commodity?
The bigger question is, does Venezuela have any interest in stabilizing their currency? No. If they wanted to, they could, but
to a new world. We actually can imagine a future in which governments are not involved in money at all, except maybe having a national money so you pay your taxes. Wouldn't that be just a glorious thing? This is the future of the dollar. You have to get this crap because you have to pay taxes, and that's about it.
In response to what you were just mentioning before about how the governments are actually now losing favorability or trust and everything, I have, you got the big players like the United States, Russia, China, they're all putting their foot forward about what they think towards Bitcoin, as well as defending their fiat currencies of choice. And Bitcoin is, of course, a threat if they don't want to admit it, it seems like they aren't really taking their foot forward. And
you know, you're just wondering what we have to lose. You know, with completely different dynamics. So it's possible that these small countries might take a gambit like that. But the larger countries, well, they see, oh, look what Bulgaria is doing it, we should do it too. Not a chance.
Exchange rate is actually the least relevant consideration. It's the number of Bitcoin wallets that are being downloaded, the number of transactions per day. These are the kinds of things you should be following if you want to see the future of Bitcoin. And really, it's just like in the last 10 months, the number of daily transactions in Bitcoin have doubled all over the world. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, we're going to see.
You know, with the Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, you throw it all together at the time of the financial crisis when the central banks have been discredited. It's like you couldn't script it any better for a time and place. The zeitgeist is just perfect. So, and then you saw the riches and the 22-year-olds with the with the check shirts and the blue jeans, or with the office.
I want to believe that, but I can't see myself at Macy's trying to buy something and waiting 10 minutes for the blockchain to finish. So I'm looking at these other competing currencies that seem to have better architecture.
What's an example of that?
As far as I understand, even Litecoin, which I'm not a big fan of, but Litecoin, Peercoin, have faster transactions.
But here's the beautiful thing.
I forget the market cap of Facebook. I mean, it could be worth a tenth of that in 2 years. You never know. Someone's going to come up and build a better Facebook. People say, Facebook, they're gone. It's got, it's fungible. Nobody really likes Facebook. They just like the utility of it and the uniqueness of it. You change that, and it's got no more value. Same reason these cryptocurrencies, something comes along that's better than Bitcoin, and you've got all your wealth in Bitcoin, that's a problem. They haven't invented a new precious metal in about a
at all. And I called him up on Skype and I said, Frank, this is a catastrophic article. You should actually read something about it before you write about it. And he said, no, look, it's obviously true. It's obviously very obvious to me that Bitcoin is just a big hoax. It's a Ponzi scheme and everything else. And I said, why is that? He said, well, you can't do anything with digits. Digits aren't real. And I said, what about this phone card? Think back 10 years ago and find out how many people in the world believed that something like Bitcoin could actually exist. Do you know how many there were? Like 0, okay? So there's not a single monetary economist teaching at any Ivy League university in the world that imagines something like Bitcoin could happen.
And that's if you're a business and you're operating on a 10% margin, which is actually a pretty decent margin, and 2% of that, the top line transaction cost, that's a big number. And if someone comes along with, hey, our transaction costs are 2 basis points, 3 basis points. That's gonna just cut out. I was designing a report for my firm, and we're a FINRA-regulated financial firm. So we have internal compliance officers who review all the materials we put together. And basically, your own compliance officers are kind of like it's like internal affairs at the police department. They don't really work for you; they work for the government because it's true. And their boss is not the
third of the protocol. Has been released into recently. There's a whole third that's left over that allows for smart contracts and all kinds of financial dealings and insurance and everything else. And just as a technology, it's the basis for the creation, basically a reinvention of the world financial system. And we're talking all about compliance and governments and things like that. I was just hanging out in Miami with a bunch of Bitcoiners, and the young, brilliant people that are dealing in platforms like Ethereum and things like this. They're extraordinary. I mean, they're not political people, but basically they
companies to raise money from accredited investors, $250,000 or more, but much simpler. So you can go out and have a website, say, I got a great company, I'm selling shares, who wants in?
Instead of buying lottery tickets, have people giving small denominations of money to the air, instead of invest in the next Facebook invest in a new flexible icon. There are legal restrictions on some.
And cryptocurrency, you're allowed to customize the kind of information you give out, from 0 coin all the way to coughing up a lot of identity. There's many transactions, of course, that are absolutely require your identity. So there's a purpose to having a range available when you transmit currency. Perfect anonymity is not universally desirable. I tend to, well, I favor both approaches actually, but I have friends of mine that are talking to the Fed right now about this. They're trying to keep the channels of communication open with the bureaucracies. I can't believe that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That doesn't mean
Africa, which is actually one of the fastest economic growth in the world, is more than third position after China, India, and population, and at least in the remittances, more than $44 billion is spent a year, and people outside the world send money back to Africa are losing a lot of money. What's your input about this matter, Bitcoins in Africa?
Yeah, let me just say something about that. I was actually given a chance to lecture in Africa digitally. I was lecturing from Alabama, but I was being broadcast in Africa, and it was a beautiful room with students sitting on, sort of wooden benches inside of sort of a grassy
21st century in terms of monetary exchange, which is great, and I think it's certainly in places like where the governments aren't as strong. And again, as I said earlier, they don't have a lot to lose; they have a lot to gain. I think you can see adoption very quickly.
Exactly, because we can say that in the places where, like in Africa.
My answer to that is, as soon as that technology becomes available, cryptography will adapt. And it's always a process. Our minds are so limited. We always think about whatever exists now. We don't often think about the progress we're going to see in the future. And I think this is a good case in point of that.
Hi, my name's Mary. Thanks. So I think gold doesn't need a PR campaign, right? So for people to use it, but I fear that Bitcoin.
Monetary theory, you have to know about open source networks and peer-to-peer exchanges. A shitload of stuff you have to understand, right? But just as with electricity, now we just turn on the freaking light and nobody knows how it happens, It's going to be this way with Bitcoin in the future. We're just going to use it, nobody's going to care.
Although, I would say, the first time I saw a Bitcoin transaction, I was like, wow, that's really easy. Look at that. Wow, that's you never need to put your hand in your pocket, and you're done. So I don't think that's the problem. I think you show people that. Everyone has a cell phone, right? Everybody, 98% of people do. You show them how to do it, and it's logical. We go to
Here's Nick Spanos, the founder of the Bitcoin Center.
Wow. Thank you guys for coming.